Today, I'm so excited. My guest is the publisher of some of my favorite art books, and you can see a whole bunch of them here on the screen. John Fleskes, welcome, and thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me. This is my first time doing an interview like this, and appreciate you putting in the time and work to invite me to do this.
Well, I've been wanted to talk to you for a long time, and glad that I have the chance. Ever since I saw the first art book of yours, which I have right here, actually, not your first art book, but the first one to me. I think it was maybe 2021.
Mm.
This book came
Mhm.
out, and I'm a long time like fan of art books. It's my favorite vice. And I got this in the mail and opened it up, and out popped this little card here. Just look at that art. And and it was the end for me. Like I just looked at this and thought, how did all these books exist that I don't know about? And so I think I got the Mark Schultz, I think it was Carbon 4, like immediately, and then just made a huge list. So you and I, like, we share, I think, a lot of the same interests in art. For me, I came to it from comic books, and then sort of from there, I got into like more illustration, fine art, fantasy art. But can you tell us about how you got into this kind of art?
Yeah, yeah. So Al Williamson in particular, I started working for Lee Hester at Lee's Comics in Palo Alto, California in 1993. And at that time, he introduced me to a lot of amazing things that have been a big part of my life. Al Williamson, Mark Schultz, Sam Cooke, who is a musician who I love. And that sort of started my big love for this because he introduced me to the EC comics, which was new to me at the time. So I was 21 when I started there. So I had been buying and comics since I was a kid. I started when I was 12 in 1984, and the first comic book I ever got was John Byrne's Alpha Flight #2. And Alpha Flight is just nostalgia and John Byrne artwork and
Mm-hmm.
storytelling. It's just a mixture of all these things that I just love. And that and Secret Wars, Mike Zeck's art, those are the two things that really got me into comics as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just started buying everything. As you know, when you're that age, everything is new, everything's exciting, everything is, cool. And I didn't realize it at the time, but John Romita Jr.'s Daredevil run is huge for me. It's
Mm-hmm.
a run in the late 80s that I love, and Al inked all of those. So
All
without
right.
really realizing it, all of the motion and fluidity that makes Al so wonderful was there in the inks for that series. And so I really kind of got to understand Al's work at that time, uh, predominantly looking at EC comics. And I've always been drawn more toward the weird fantasy, weird science fantasy, more so than the horror stuff. I love the horror stuff, but the science stuff, I mean,
Mm,
Wally Wood and
man,
Williamson and Frazetta Williamson stuff, and everything you can find in there. It's just amazing, amazing work.
this is just
And
such a Wally
so,
Wood picture, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. And then while I was working at Lee's Comics, one of the customers is Jim Vadeboncoeur Jr. And Jim, I'm going to grab something here. I found this to show people. So this is, let me see if I can get this camera set up. Al Williamson in his work, Promethean Enterprises. It was a checklist that Jim published in 1971. So here's this customer who came in who had been publishing since the late 60s, along with Bud Plant, who I don't know if you know who Bud is, but
Yeah, yeah. He's early on he did fanzines, and he did a lot of the like early direct distribution, right?
that's right. That's right. And Jim and Bud Plant were close friends. So
Mm-hmm.
I started helping. Jim invited me to his home, and he had every single Atlas comic book that exists, as well as a lot of the ECs. And he was a huge Al Williamson nut. So
Mm-hmm.
here I am all of a sudden packing books from. He ran a rare book business out of his house, which he co-owned with Bud Plant. And so here I was at 21 and 22 having instant access to everything. This is
Mm-hmm.
pre-internet, right? So if you can imagine two of the biggest collectors in the country who um, are absolute addicts for this type of material. So I had, at a young age, access to the physical comic books, the physical books that all of them were a part of. And not just EC, but everything they did from when they started in Famous Funnies. Al Williamson started in Famous Funnies doing a little stuff for the stories, little spot drawings, and then going all the way up to the Flash Gordon and the X9 stuff, and then Star Wars stuff, and on and on and
Yeah.
on. So it was pretty amazing to have access to everything at such a young age. And also, Jim, he had published fanzines in the 60s. And so I see that was my first look at, oh, here's somebody who actually published something. So, but that's the whole Al Williamson story in a nutshell. Later on, I met Al in for the first time in, I think it was 90, yeah, it was 1997. He came to the San Diego Comic-Con, and I got to meet him, and he did a sketch in my sketchbook, which was awesome. And a comic art dealer next to him had a John Wayne original page, and I bought that,
Hmm.
and Al signed it, and he told me the story. He goes, "Oh, Frank inked this panel, but I did this, and this was one of those
Yeah,
things
they
that we
used to
did."
collaborate, right? Like on the page, deadlines and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. Al wasn't as he was a little uncomfortable. He wasn't confident with his inking as much in
Hmm.
the early days. And then, of course, later on, I think he's one of the best inkers
He might be the
out there.
greatest inker of all time, right? He's up in the
Mhm.
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah,
Probably don't get
yeah,
to be like that unless you're uncomfortable with your inking, right? Like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But I mean, he was notoriously insecure, as
Hmm.
a lot of the artists who I work with are that way. They're constantly thinking that they need to improve themselves or get better. And there's not a lot of big egos in this industry.
Hmm.
And it might be nice for people to hear this, but I mean, these guys are great. You're going to hear me say the word wonderful for describing people a lot as we talk.
Yeah.
And, um, so that's to answer the beginning of the question. But
Yeah,
yeah,
Scott Connor in chat says, I imagine that you having access to Jim at that time would have been like Kaluta and Wrights and having access to Roy Krenkel. And that makes me think of like you're in California, right?
yeah,
And I feel like there's a big scene in that area of like all these guys. Like you hear all these stories, and they all take place there. And you even see like the different like the New Masters Academy, Proco, Watts Atelier, like all that stuff is out there. I feel like there's just a big kind of culture of this kind of art happening where you are. Is that accurate?
yeah, partially so. And first of all, I want to say hi to Scott because Scott's been a long time customer, and I know his name. So hi, Scott, and I'm glad you're here. And there's, Northern California and Southern California are very different than one another. And, when you were talking about the Proco, was it?
Hmm.
They're all, that's a 7-hour drive. It might
Oh,
as
is
well
it?
be a state to us. So California is so big. The Bay Area, Palo Alto in particular, is probably where I was born and raised and lived for the first 20 years of my life. That's where Jim lived, and I worked at the comic shops there. There was a pretty strong fandom there, but the art community wasn't really huge there. I think the fandom was really big there. Although Mike Mignola and Arthur Adams grew up in the area, and I saw those guys when I was pretty young, but I wouldn't say it was like a huge thing there compared to Southern California, where in Southern California, it seems like there's always something going on every day revolving around the arts. And because you have the film and
Right.
industry
And San
and
Diego Comic Con is there. Like
San Diego
would
Comic-Con,
have had to
yeah,
come out of some kind of a fan culture,
yeah,
right?
yeah. But getting to know Jim and having access to his collection and wealth of knowledge, here was a guy who he could look at you can grab any comic book, open it up, put it in front of his face, and he knew exactly who penciled it, who inked it, who, did the compositions for it or the
Hmm.
layouts. He just had an eye for that stuff, and he could just nail down artists really well. And um, so I was at Jim's house constantly in my 20s. It was probably a 5-year stretch where I was just there all the time.
Hmm.
and or we talk on the phone, and he was a good friend up until he passed away a few years ago. And it was there was no other person who is more responsible than Jim for me being a publisher and being into this stuff. So
And a
really
little
lucky.
bit, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, 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 go ahead.
Yeah, a little bit later, I want to talk about like artistic lineage, especially
Mm,
with some of these artists here. But in thinking about that in preparation to talk to you, I was also thinking about like the art book lineage. You know, like
mm,
so you can trace Franklin Booth back to the 1200s, and then tracing back like art book publishers, like you said, Vadeboncoeur, and I think you mentioned Alice Carter, who you
yes,
collaborated with here, and I think on the Booth book
Walt
too.
Reed.
Yeah, yeah, and Walt Reed, right? Who did was it Harvey Dunn book for you? So
Hmm.
uh, thinking of yourself in that kind of lineage of art book publishers, and also you said that you didn't go to school for any of this. You taught yourself how to do like book design. You taught yourself how to do all the business stuff, all those different aspects. So when approaching a big project, something like this Al Williamson book, you said it took. I think I read that it took you 10 years of research to do, and of
Mm.
course this is like 20 years after you've started. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, in general, how do you approach a huge project, like a big undertaking that you don't really have a lot of experience with, and then maybe sort of specific examples of how it relates to art book, and maybe how does that being a part of that lineage help?
That's a really good question, and I'm not sure how good I'll be at answering it because I've never really thought about it too much in depth outside of this is just something that I like doing and I do it.
Hmm.
So I'll try and work my way through the question here just
Yeah,
by
sorry, it's a
talking.
big question, so I can chunk it down if you need me to.
No, 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 not at all. Let's work it out. Let's hash it out because it is a good thing for even myself to understand a little more clearly. So with Al's book. When I say it took 10 years, it's not like it takes 10 years to design and write and put the
Yeah.
book together. It's more of just collecting all the information and collecting scans of the artwork and making sure that you have a nice representation of everything. And so, and also during that time, which was, a lot through the 2010s, I was so involved with Spectrum Fantastic Art.
Hmm.
It was really hard for me to work on things like this. And so, in 2019, in June of 2019, I stepped down from Spectrum because I really missed working on these individual art collections. And I felt like I'm going to spend the next 20 years working on Spectrum, and I'm not going to be able to do all these things that I also want to do
Right.
because Spectrum just took so much time, year after year after year. So it wasn't that I didn't like Spectrum, it was just that I missed doing individual art book collections. So in 2019, I was like, okay, this is it. I'm ready to move on to other stuff. And then I had no way of knowing that the pandemic was going to hit, in March in 2020. And the first thing that I did was I don't want to sound, it's not a good thing because it was a terrible moment for a lot of people. But for me, it was kind of a relief.
Hmm.
I didn't have to do shows. I didn't have to go out in public. I'm super introverted.
Hmm.
And I was able to just sit down and make books. And I found it to be this incredibly relaxing period where I could just focus. And the Al Williamson book that you were holding, that's a pandemic baby. I
Here.
just sat for months and I didn't have any distractions, and I could just sit down and day after day after day put in this committed time to it that I didn't normally have for myself. Um,
And I'm
so
gonna I'm
that's just
gonna flip through this a little bit later. I have some specific things I want to talk about
sure,
with this, so I don't wanna
sure.
don't wanna spoil it yet. But yeah, please continue.
Yeah. But getting back to what you were saying about let's talk about, the lineage of making books. So back when I started collecting comics in 1984, I was really drawn to books at the same time. And graphic novels they weren't very common. There were some that were
Hmm.
coming out. The DC and Marvel were putting out some stuff. They started putting out the Epic line. There was some stuff. There was these. Oh, I know. There were some straight to graphic novel formats like Bill Sienkiewicz with
Right.
some Elektra title, some Batman titles, and those are really neat. Like those really influenced me. I was like, wow, here's stuff that's coming out in book form, not as a comic book. That's really cool.
Hmm.
And then later on, I learned about French publishing, how everything's published as an album rather than a comic book.
Yeah.
Loved it. I love the format. I love the designs, just how sophisticated they look. So, and then I started getting into illustration at the same time. And Scott had mentioned Roy Krenkel. And I discovered Roy Krenkel probably the same time I discovered Al. And then through Roy Krenkel, I'm like, oh, wow, well, look at this person. Look, here's Lindsay. Here's, Heinrich Clay or Cly. I'm not sure
Yeah.
how to pronounce it. Here's all these other people. And, you know, I got really into Bernie Wrightson and I was like, oh, the Frankenstein stuff. Oh, wow, look at this Franklin Booth guy. Oh, well, look at, now look at, Edwin Austin Abbey and Howard Pyle and N.C. Wyeth. And so it was just if the floodgates opened at that point. So I would think not only Roy Krenkel, but also Bernie Wrightson were probably the two most important bridges to the
Hmm.
past in that regard. And so I was just consuming comics and books. And then by that time, having access to Jim's collection. And also, I went to a lot of rare book shows where they have the rare books that are behind cases that would be, uh, the type of stuff you would just wouldn't normally see. It was more
Hmm.
like a museum and discovering artists like Herbert Railton and who I like a lot. No one knows who he is except for me and like two other people, but I love his stuff.
What's his name?
And Herbert Railton,
Herbert Railson. I'm gonna write this down for later. How do you spell it?
yeah,
Realton?
that's right. Yeah. I have an original. I wish I had it here to show you, but it's stunning. There was one of our regulars was getting rid of his collection, and he wrote me an email and just offered me his Herbert Railton original because he knew I would appreciate it.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible. So, but I think from looking at all of these books, and especially books from the 19 teens, so you're talking all the gift books that came out just before World War One, where they really had to stop making books like that because of the paper shortages and the war
Right.
efforts and things like that. But there was this period of time between about 1908, 1915, where books were just awesome. And they had these tip-in plates, they had these, vellum inserts and things, these gilt edges, these like uncut ends and things. Those books really influenced me
Hmm.
at that time. Just at the artistry that went into them.
Yeah.
So, mhm.
I was thinking about like what you do from the perspective of a visual artist, right? Like you're part sculptor because you're creating these objects, right? Like you're making all these little decisions that kind of come together to build this thing. In addition to being a designer and a curator, right? Because every book you make is like an art exhibition. You know, you're choosing what to put in, what to keep out. Um, and so you're saying like having had access and having seen all of the great art books from history, you kind of absorb that knowledge and become more of a like a connoisseur almost. Like what do you look at when you see an art book? Like what do you look for to see if it's
Um,
quality or not? Is it merely the content, or are there little decisions that you think about that you try to notice when you're looking at things?
it's not that intentional.
Hmm.
I don't think I can answer that question outside of I look at it and I either like it or I don't,
Right.
or kind of like it, or um, there's a lot of art books I look at these days, and it's hard for me to enjoy
Hmm.
because I might see how it's designed. Um, there was a book on Brian Bolland, one of my absolute favorite artists, and I just couldn't enjoy the book. It was filled with typos, you know,
Yeah.
the kind of the weird overlays and overlaps and stuff like that. It just, I say this to my friends, so maybe it doesn't sound very good to say in an interview, but I'll just say, "Oh, that hurts my eyes." It's
Hmm.
hard to look at, but I try to find ways to present artwork that's pleasing to the eye
Yeah.
because you're really here's a good example. So I love Jack Kirby. He's one of my number one. He's my guy, right? I
Yeah.
just love his comics. I love everything about him. Ever since I was a kid, even in the 80s, I was buying 60s Jack Kirby, 50s and 60s Jack Kirby stuff for a couple bucks in the bins. I just thought he was the coolest guy. But I love the pacing. And so when a book is being put together, I'm very conscious about making a film out of it. So the way the artwork is placed, the positioning the artwork in the book, where it goes, and how to separate art. Because what I'm doing is I'm creating speed and slowing down moments because I want people to enjoy the book as if they've gone to the movies.
Hmm.
And um, have you ever picked up an art book and you just flip through it, flip, 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 and it's like, it's like a 5-minute book and you
Hmm.
spent $3 on it.
Yeah.
And it's filled with great art, but you can't, your eye doesn't, you don't really, your brain and your eyes don't really know how to just enjoy the book for a couple hours. And so my attempt from the beginning was always, okay, what would Jack Kirby do in terms of pacing? Because he has these really cool, I love the panels that he does and how they all interconnect, they all have purpose. And so even with these books, there's a lot of purpose to everything and how it is put together. And one additional thing too is my design sense and my design style changes from artist to artist because I think that it needs to cater to that artist.
Hmm.
With the living artists, we talk a lot about the design and what they want and what they want to see. And if it's someone like Franklin Booth, who obviously is not with us, I try to put the book together in a way that I hope would please him if he was here with us. And in this case, I'm studying a lot of books that would have been released during the time when he was alive that
Oh
he
wow.
probably would have appreciated and enjoyed.
That's a really interesting approach. It never would have occurred to me to do that. Like you try to get inside his head, right? You're basically trying to represent him as he would represent himself. And
Mhm.
I did read that you organized this not chronologically, at least not in the back section, but more by feel. And that's that's a really smart move, looking at what
Mhm.
was contemporary to him and what maybe, and I guess that speaks to the influence chain as well, right? What influenced him not only as an artist but as an appreciator of artists would influence
Mhm.
how you would present him as an appreciator of him to other people who might appreciate him. That's smart.
Yeah, you want to look at his friends.
Hmm.
How did they do things? He self-published a book called The Buildings in the early 30s. And that's a book that he was a part of that book. Also, if you look at the Franklin Booth drawings book that came out in 1925, and that's a book he played a heavy role in. And by looking at that, you can see what his style was. You can see how he put his artwork together into a book. And there is a lot of white space in this book, a
Hmm.
lot of borders. You'll see, at least with my style, I like a lot of borders and a lot of big white space.
Yeah,
Uh,
let the room, the work breathe, right?
yeah, and in his he does even more,
Well, and
but
especially with his work, it's so busy. Like there's so much
mm,
going on. You need these areas, even in his own compositions, right? You have this space for the eye to rest. Some more open areas, because otherwise it gets overwhelming. So it makes sense that you would leave the white space in the book. Like there's an analogy between his work and that presentation.
yeah, and even with this piece here with the tiger scene, there's a lot more white space on the left-hand side.
Hmm.
And now that I'm looking at it again, that top piece didn't need to be there. It's a little distracting.
Hmm.
But that was probably me just wanting to be complete at that time by making sure all of the images were in there. So that's more of a completist part of me rather
Hmm.
than the design part of me, because without that, it would look even better.
I think it's. I mean, it's placed quite nicely. I mean, if you just look at it from a compositional standpoint, these pause overlapping kind of lead really nicely into this. If you read it like a comic page, you can
Yeah,
kind of see how it's organized that way.
the pause intentionally, the paw on the right hand side is intentionally going right down to his head. So it's
Yeah,
pointing him to his head, and then the body is pointing you to the facing page, and that's done intentionally as
like this
well.
here.
I wouldn't have had those on opposite sides.
Yeah.
And then also one nice thing about Booth is like Arthur Adams, there's a lot of lines, but it reads so well and
Oh
not very
yeah.
many. can do that.
Yeah, he organizes his values really well, so everything is distinct, and you can even see like this figure here with this darker shape behind him kind of pops. This is probably, well, I'm looking at it from this page, but the way you laid it out and the way he laid it out, you would come in maybe through here or through here into this figure, and then come down to these figures and have like the light on the dark, and then the dark on the light, kind of
Mhm.
making it read that way. And it's fascinating to me that what you've been saying, you're approaching book design as a comic book artist approaches a comic book page. Not just the Jack Kirby, but
Yeah,
each individual artist, how the
every
eye
book.
flows and the pacing. Like you mentioned earlier, you want to sort of control the speed that the reader goes through it,
Hmm.
which is exactly what a comic book artist does with how
Hmm.
they design the page and the gutters and all that and the page turns. So that's
Yeah.
I don't know. It's something I had never occurred to me before. Like
Hmm.
I've designed a few books of my own stuff, not anything of this level, but I'm always trying to think about that kind of a thing. And so now talking to you today, I get to chew on that for a long time. So that's really exciting for me.
Yeah, yeah, there's a purpose. And with this book, it's a little different because I am doing it chronologically, so you are limited by that. And so you can't always, design it exactly how you want, but
Hmm.
I do like that this is a chronological book because it's telling a life story in that way. It's kind of walking you through his life. And here you'll see on the left-hand page and on the right-hand page, sometimes I would add the text,
Hmm.
sometimes I would not. And I did that intentionally too, because the text being added, it shows people what its purpose was,
Hmm.
but then the other one would show you what it would look like if it was just the original art in front of you.
Yeah, this is how Booth would have seen it while he was making it, and then this is how it would have
Mhm.
been published, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really kind of clever decision too. Give us just enough so that we can imagine what this would be like, but
Yeah.
we don't have the distraction of the words, because this is a we're looking at the pictures really.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. He made such a transformation between about 1908 and 1912. It's like something really clicked with him. And that's when he went from just an illustrator to Franklin Booth.
Hmm.
And, and I noticed that with a lot of artists. I noticed that with Daniel Warren Johnson,
Hmm.
who just finished a book with, and it's at the printer right now. And he had the same transformation. You could really see between one year and the next. And I actually, when I was talking to him, I said, here it is. Here's the comic book where you became DWJ.
Hmm.
And so, sometimes people just, it takes everyone a while. Well, most people, it takes a whole lifetime if they're
Sure.
lucky. But
I love when I pick up a comic, like maybe a series, and in issue one, you can see the more raw version of the artist. And then as you go through issue two, issue three, you kind of see them figuring out what they're doing, kind of coming into their own, maybe understanding the
yeah.
characters more. Like I love seeing that progression. I feel like there's a lot of artists who worry about that, who try to kind of cover that
Mhm.
up. And I've even known a couple of people who intentionally stifled their development, like at least on the page, for the sake of consistency across the project. And
Mhm.
I mean, to me, that's one of the most exciting things is seeing that kind of evolution over time.
Mhm.
And and so the Daniel Warren Johnson book, by the way, for those of you watching, that just came out. It was on Kickstarter, and let me see, you can pre-order it. There, the link to the
Actually,
website.
on October 1st.
October
So,
1st is when pre-order
mm.
starts for that. I wanted to show your website since we're here, and the link to the website is in chat for those of you watching. Also, Scott Corner said that it was Charles Vest who turned him on to a lot of those artists, and it just
Oh yeah,
snowballed from there. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah,
Every.
Vess is a great one. There was a nice hardcover book that came out. I think it was in the late 80s. Scott might be able to help me out with this, but it was a Midsummer's Night Dream.
Mhm.
And he did the Marvel fanfare with the Thor characters, the Asgard characters, which I really liked as a kid. So, and then the Web of Spider-Man #1 cover that Vess did, that was really
Oh,
big
that's
for
with the
me.
black costume, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
stuck in my head. There's something about that. I don't know, is it painted or something? There's a quality to it that's unlike any
Mhm.
other comic book cover.
Yeah.
See if I can find that real quick.
So, and I could say something else here. So as you can tell, Booth's originals are incredibly rare, and even after all these years, I've only seen a few. I have a
Hmm.
small one, but all of these were, I always try to scan from the originals.
Yeah.
But books like this and books like The Abbey, I'm actually scanning from the old magazines. And uh, yeah, there it is.
Wow.
Yeah, great cover. I remember buying that as a kid, and I still have my entire comic collection, everything I ever bought since
Hmm.
'84.
Same here.
And that is just, man, it's a great cover.
Something about there's a texture or something to it. There's that,
Mhm.
like, it just doesn't look like anything else. If I was, I think I was a little young for this at the time it came out. If I walked into the supermarket and I saw this, it would just be like a magnet. I would have no choice but to take it.
Yeah, yeah, very iconic.
And Scott
Um,
Connor says it was the Midsummer Night's Dream book published by Dawning Starblaze.
yeah, yeah, great book. Yeah, I have one of those. But something you notice here is I did not enlarge anything. So if they appeared in the magazines at that
Hmm.
size, I kept them that size. What you would see probably from some people is they would, blow them up really big. But
Right.
Booth's originals were small. He did not draw them really that much bigger than what you see in the magazines or the same size, the few
Hmm.
that I've seen. So, um,
So this would be approximately this size, or maybe just slightly bigger than the original.
they would be a little bit bigger, but not a
Hmm.
whole heck of a lot. And Um, I think if you're blowing them up, you're just kind of you're doing something that's goofing up what he intended. And I love all the white space on this page so much, and those two pieces a
Yeah.
lot.
But
Just great,
like how
great
you
spread.
you have this black shape here and then this white shape here, kind of. Um,
Mm,
it's a nice lineup because you could have put this one lower or this one anywhere on the page. That's a nice kind of well, we have the fancy art word that we like to say, which is the juxtaposition. It's
mm.
a nice juxtaposition between these two.
I'm completely self-taught in all of this stuff. So
Yeah.
I mean, I really don't do very well in school and
Hmm.
structures and things like that. So sitting in a classroom just kind of drives me crazy. But um, all of this, a lot of this stuff I'm doing just very subconsciously. So as we're talking here, you're going to be able to pull things out of me that help to, reveal how my mind works, not just to
Yeah.
you, to me. But
Well, good.
yeah, yeah.
It's just all gold, right? Just thinking about how to do this. I don't know. This stuff excites me so much. I'm like I said, our art books are one of my favorite vice.
Mm,
So I don't know. It's just amazing. Um, so your design stuff was intuitive, but like with the sort of the business side, the publishing side, that
mhm.
can't be intuitive, can it? Like, how did you figure out how to do all that stuff? How do you figure out how to even, you know, you had to figure out how to prepare files for the printer in the right format. Like, it, for me, it was a ton of trial and error and mistakes and stuff. But I don't know. How
Mhm.
did you go about that?
With the publishing, that was all Jim Vadeboncoeur.
So
I saw
he
him.
helped you.
He had started, here, let me show you. He started a magazine called, uh, I got to figure this out.
Mhm.
It's called Images Magazine.
Yeah, I saw this online and I'm super interested in it.
And this came out in 2001. And I was working for Jim at the time. And there's number one, there's a series here. God, I'm a little sorry, I'm a little goofy with this. And, Jim and I both love it. Here's a great Harry Roundtree piece.
Hmm.
Harry
Yeah,
Roundtree.
yeah,
And of course, there's a beautiful, J.C. Call piece. Oh, an unusual painted piece. And Jim also did these black and white images, which look like this. And these are thick magazines filled with black and white drawings
yeah.
from a lot of artists from the early 1900s. And so when asking about, how did you learn how to prepare artwork and how did you learn how to get going? This was all from watching Jim put Images magazine together because
Mhm.
I was there with him. I saw the whole process. and that launched the whole thing. So it was just pure luck, really. And then Jim had released Jimages #1, and I was like, I want to do a Franklin Booth book. That would be
Hmm.
cool. And he had all the original magazines. He had all the Harpers, the Colliers, Ladies' Home Journal. He had those magazines going, for decades. And so I scanned from that, and I saw how Jim did it, and just took off from there. And I think that, beyond Jim, just in terms of designing that first book, so that was it was released in April of 2002, the first book that I published.
Hmm.
I started that book in the fall of 2001.
Oh,
So I was working full time, and in the evenings and the weekends, I was just cranking on the book, putting
yeah.
it together. I learned InDesign from scratch, and I learned Photoshop from scratch.
Not
And
easy to
again,
do, both of
I
those
I
programs.
do I do not do good in schools or looking at books. So the way I learned both is just hitting buttons.
Right.
And I opened InDesign and I started hitting buttons and figuring it out. And same with Photoshop. And there's a certain process that for doing images like this, from scanning from magazines and stuff. And um, it's just years of practice. You prepare it a certain way, you have it printed, you look at the output, and then you know how to adjust moving forward. There's no sameness here.
Right, because what it looks
Um,
like on the screen is very different than what it looks like when it's printed. And then when it's printed
mhm.
on this kind of paper versus that kind of paper, it looks different.
Yeah, I know exactly when I look on a screen, I know exactly what it'll look like on a matte paper,
Mm.
glossy paper, wood-free stock, textured stock, and I
It's just a
know
matter of experience, right?
that is, yeah. So it's just a lot of practice, and but with the black and white stuff, it's easier. The first color book I did was with Steve Rude, and that's intimidating because that's all new, and you don't want your blues to go purple, be the books. So it's
Yeah.
just time and energy, and um, I'm very meticulous about everything that I do. I will spend just an ungodly amount of time like this here.
Hmm.
If I needed to spend 3 hours prepping that image for publication, I would do it because it
Right.
has to be right. And the whatever time it's needed is needed. And I'm not working for somebody. I'm not on the clock. They're not
Yeah.
saying, hey, we only have a budget of this, so you need to get this done and out the door. And so I don't have that shortcoming working for myself or running my own studio or anything, because whatever time is needed is needed. That's just the way it goes.
Well, it shows that you put a lot of time and care into it. However, you have put out, was it over 100 books in 23 years?
100 something,
100
maybe
something books,
20,
right?
something like that. I'd have to
So,
look.
yeah, it's not like you're spending years and years to put one book out. You're able to give every book the attention and every page the attention that it deserves, and yet you're able to give us all of this at the same time. Um, like,
Uh-huh.
oh, please go on.
I juggle a lot, so I typically like to work on 3 books at the same time. And I guess to put it into a term that maybe would work good for you is, or an artist who would have 3 paintings up, and
Yeah,
they might work on one, and they get stuck, and they'll go, okay, well, let me work on a different one. And then you look back at the other one the next day and go, oh, I know what I'm going to do there. And so, but I have found that 3 is the magic number, because if I work on 4, my brain doesn't
hmm,
work as good. And if I just work on 2, I get a little bored. But I'm not working on all 3 of them with equal energy.
right.
Usually I have a main one. That's my main focus. So I'm putting, let's say, 70% of my mental brain into that, or 80%. And then the other 2, it's more like, well, let me make sure I'm getting these kind of ready and going and ready, so that when I finish this one, these are all set to go. So it could be as simple as, okay, let me write this guy and ask him to do an introduction, or, oh, I better contact the artist and ask for these 5 images. because I'm missing those images. Or, oh, there's a collector I know that maybe they have this original. So let's see if we can track this down. So you're doing little things like this so that when you're putting your 80% onto that book, you have the components that you need. And also, there's times where I'm waiting on something. So rather than just sitting around, I'm like, oh, well, I'll just work on this other book until they're done. And a really good example of that is Bruce Timm, because with Bruce, he could be, you know, no contact for 3, 4 months if he's working on a film. So you're working as much as you can, but then you might have a big gap. So okay, well, let's work on something else. It's, I'm not just waiting. So that's why I like working on three at that point.
Yeah, it's an efficient use of time. I do exactly the same thing with my work. I try to have a few different projects in a few different stages, and but not too many, like you say. I find that they also kind of help inform each other as I go. So there's kind of little things from this project that like, oh yeah, maybe I can put that into this one in some way, or at least it kind of colors the way I think about the other project. Do you find that is
Mhm.
the same as well?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And and I'll add something to this too, is my role here is purely to serve the artist.
Hmm.
That's it. If I've done my job correctly, I'm invisible. People enjoy the book. They see the artwork, they read the book, they look at the captions, and they're enjoying that other person, that artist, their life. And I'm the guy who, like, hopefully I throw the big party, but I'm hidden in my own little room
Yeah.
somewhere, and they don't even know I was involved or something like that. So it's all about serving the artist, and I really enjoy that. It's fun. Um, but it is a little tricky when you're working with an artist who's no longer with us, like Al. But fortunately, with Al, I met him a handful of times. I visited him at his home, spent a couple days together. So from that, while it wasn't an incredible amount of time, you do understand who he is. And um, he was a really funny guy, really good sense of humor.
Hmm.
He was for somebody who had the insecurities in terms of him not feeling like his artwork was necessarily the best, is incredible.
Yeah.
And he worked so hard, but he was a goofball, he's just a regular guy, just a funny guy. And
You can see that um,
the
from this photo. So,
pictures.
so this is a wonderful thing that you include here.
Mm.
These are some of the reference photos that they would take. Was it Frazetta, Roy Krenkel, and so that they could use these as reference for their drawings for their projects. And yeah, you can see the just the kind of the personality come through, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And uh-huh.
oh, sorry, go on.
One time when we were visiting Al, we were working on the Flash Gordon book that
Hmm.
came out in 2009. And I had my camera, and we have a lot of behind the scenes pictures that I've never shown anyone and not put online before. And there's just Al had this antique replica of a Flash Gordon gun. The guns and
Yeah,
the
yeah,
toys that came out in the 40s and 30s. They were like real metal. They're real heavy. And
yeah.
Al had
That's
one,
right.
and he kept posing with it like Flash Gordon. It was so funny. And yeah, he's a great guy. So good.
Hugo asked, as far as working on simultaneous projects for you, do you find
Mhm.
that there are projects or types of projects that you cannot do at the same time?
I'm trying to think if there ever was. Well, actually, I will say this. Usually, when I'm finishing a project, for instance, the Franklin Booth book that you were
Hmm.
just showing, or even this Al Williamson book, the last, 3 weeks where you're really nailing it down and getting it ready to send to the printer, it's 100,000% of my focus.
Yeah.
I'm not juggling books at that point. And especially when it comes to doing all of the final checks.
You can't afford to be
So
distracted at that point, right? Because
no,
that's the
it's
last possible time you have to make changes or find
Mhm.
typos or mistakes.
Yeah, yeah. And it takes me about for a typical book, be when I feel like a book is done, I spend about 10 hours a day for pretty much a full week. I might put in 40, 50 hours just looking for mistakes.
Hmm.
just going over and
Yeah.
over and over and over it. Like, you might see those videos of OCD guys who are like checking the locks, right? So, make
Right.
sure they lock the door and they might go back and check it 20 more
Hmm.
times. That's me for a week with
Yeah.
these books.
I feel the
Just
same.
every,
When I make a comic and I put it out, like if there's a typo, it just eats at me forever. I'm so careful, and I have a few friends who are. I have a friend who's a former copy editor, so I just it's so important to me not to have just little things like that because I feel like it speaks to the level of professionalism of the project. And for you working with other artists, like you want to represent them in the best way, and like
yeah.
that's that's
Yeah, I want
that's
to
the
do
job.
good.
Yeah,
I want him to be happy. And in Al's case, I want his wife
yeah,
and I
sure.
want his son to feel proud. And I want them to be able to pick up this book and show it to their friends and feel honor and pride in what Victor's dad and what Corey's husband did. It's a big deal. Um, and I will say I share royalties of the book sales with this book with the family too.
Hmm.
Every book that we do with the living artists and the families, we share royalties.
And I saw in the
So,
front that this is it's copyright the estate of Al Williamson, which is great.
mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's his wife and his son.
yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
Everything I do, I always, make sure that they're taken care of.
yeah. Well, and that also makes other artists want to work with you too, right?
Mm.
Like there's such a history in this industry of unseemly publishers, like
Mm.
taking advantage of artists. Artists aren't typically business people, so that's nice to hear.
It kind of pisses me off,
Yeah.
when I hear about um, publishers who take advantage of people,
Hmm.
or just in general, it doesn't matter if it's an artist or a
Yeah,
publisher,
yeah.
just in general, anyone who's taken advantage of. It just irks me, so, um, again, this isn't, I actually, I'm going to go back to Hugo's question real quick. He was
Hmm.
asking about dedicating an extended period of time to something. I actually did recently. There was the Bruce Timm book, which I haven't announced. I haven't shared anything about it yet, but it's done
Hmm.
and it's been printed. It's actually just starting to ship to us, and
Yeah.
it's awesome. It's the horror art of Bruce Timm, and I would say there was maybe a 3-week period where I was working on the book with Bruce every day.
Hmm.
And, Bruce wasn't working on any films or shows at the time, and he just got really into it. And it was just every single day working with Bruce on this book. And it was so much fun. And we would spend, I mean, people would probably go crazy watching us because Bruce is such a perfectionist, and he would be like, "Okay, just nudge it a millimeter over," and be like, "Okay,
Yeah.
now half a millimeter this way," and just, we might go back and forth, with oh, this might make people laugh, but um, he doesn't use the computer too much. So I will make a design change. I'll take a picture with my phone and text it to him, and then he'll give me feedback through
Hmm.
text, and that's how we work. And then some artists you call on the phone. Some artists it's all PDFs through email. So I
Hmm.
adjust whatever the artist wants.
Do you try to meet in person like at least once with the final setup, or at certain stages throughout the process, just to make sure that there's nothing lost in that with the digital sort of intermediary?
No, we don't meet in person in terms of the end part of it. Usually, by that point, by the time we finish the book, there's so much trust and the relationship is so strong, that's not needed.
Hmm.
But I do spend time with everyone who I work with before I even consider working with them because I need to know that we're going to get along and we're going to work well together. It's not to say that it's like people going out on dates. It doesn't mean that you're bad people. It just means you're not compatible.
Right,
So you
right.
really need to find somebody who you're really compatible with. Same temperament, same kind of ethics and core and
Hmm.
beliefs, and communication is good, professionalism, you can laugh.
Yeah.
You just click. And if you aren't clicking, you don't want to work together because you're just gonna be fighting it. And this is something that William Stout always says to people, which is if there's a problem in the beginning, it's only going to be much worse later on. So, if it starts off rocky, you just got to walk away.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
Mm.
Um, I you were talking about scanning earlier,
Hmm.
and like in the Franklin Booth book, everything is like the whites are white and crisp, and the blacks are black and crisp. And then in the Flash Gordon book, a lot of these you show the yellowing of the page, all the
Hmm.
white out and stuff. Um, and and so what goes behind the decision to handle these books in a different way like that? Is it just because the Booth ones you didn't have the originals, or and I guess my larger question is, do you have other like creators in mind when you make this? Because to me, one of the greatest innovations of the 21st century is the artist edition, because you
Hmm.
can see all the little, you can see the paste ups. You know, this head here, right, is pasted up on there. You can see when there's whiteout used. You can see when they correct things just a little bit. Even
Hmm.
the publisher notes, or the printer notes rather, in the margin here. Like, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, first of all, the artist edition, which people have coined for this has been around before artist edition books started coming out.
Hmm.
There was books before that. Maybe not in the same format and advertised and marketed the way that they have, but even we've shown pages and comic pages like that before those books came out. And before me, there was French publishers that have been doing it for years too.
I was unaware of all of that.
There's a great, oh, there's so much history to bookmaking. So
Hmm.
it might appear new to somebody who's new to comics, but
Hmm.
there's books going way back that have stuff like that. And again, I'm really inspired by French publishing. So you'll see, the Al Williamson books and things, Mark Schultz and Steve Rude book that I did in 2006. There's pages in there that are shown like that. And I got that from French publishers.
Hmm.
And there was a really good Gene Colan book that came out from um, the San Francisco Art Museum, I think it was. It's a whole book like that. And it came out pretty early and it's awesome. But to answer your question, how do you make a decision to do that or not do that?
Hmm.
And the best thing to do is talk to the artist about it because not all artists want to see their
Right,
work.
right.
And so when we did a Flash Gordon book, which was all of Al Williamson's Flash Gordon material. Came out in 2000. Did I read in 2010? I know I was working on it in 2009, early in the year, but I don't remember if we released it that fall or the early the next year. But 2009, 2010, and Mark Schultz said, "Oh, we should do this where we show all the printed boards and everything, right?" But I was like, "Well, let's ask Al."
Hmm.
And we asked Al, and Al's like, no, I want to see just my art.
Yeah.
I want to see a bunch of crappy paper. No, he didn't say it like that, but he said, I just want to see my art. I don't want to see a bunch of paper. And I actually agreed because one, um, the paper was so clean it wasn't like torn, ripped, yellowed. It was pretty white paper. It looked really nice and it was very clean. So what I did is I dropped the paper, but I left the line work. So you see the line work as if it's the originals,
Hmm.
but it doesn't have the paper. And I love how clean it looks.
Hmm.
And Al liked it too. So I deferred to the artist. Bruce Timm is another. He wants to see all of his artwork with no paper.
Yeah.
He does not want to see the paper at all. And so depend and Bill Stout, he doesn't want to see a bunch of old paper. He wants to see his artwork. And so, but other artists do. So I defer to the artist and and we'll have that discussion beforehand so we know exactly what we're going to do and how we're
Hmm.
going to approach it.
We're talking about like artistic evolution, and one thing that I really liked from these carbon books, these Mark Schultz ones, and I also have this. This was my favorite art book for a whole year, probably every day. I just had it on my drawing table and would just look at it. I've drawn so many pictures from this one. I think I even scanned a couple of his pencils, turned them to blue line, printed them, and inked them just to see what the process is. And I guess that leads to sort of a question is And I kind of asked it earlier, but this is in a different way. Like, do you have creators in mind when you're making these? Because to me, as a creator, seeing all this process, we see he's using the harmonic aperture here, which is not in all of his work. It seems like it kind of comes into it and drops out, or at least to more or less of a degree. I try to reverse engineer, how he thinks about that. We see the different iterations, the preliminary studies, and then we see this final amazing inked piece. So do you have like artists in mind when you're creating these books, or is it more for just the person who's interested in it rather than the person who's trying to reverse engineer?
Mm, got it. I guess the short answer is we always make the books for ourselves,
Mhm.
and we don't really consider the fans.
Mhm.
As terrible as that might sound, we're trying to really make a book that really focuses on Schultz and his personality, his temperament.
Mhm.
And I think that that's the best way to give the fans exactly what they want, because it serves as such an extension of who he is. And I'll tell you about the process of working with Mark. So I can tell you the long story since we're having an extended chat. But
Sure.
so I'll start from the beginning. I first met Mark as a fan. There's almost two meetings with every artist. There's the fan first time, and then there's the personal first time, which is really two different things.
Yeah.
And I first met Mark in '97 as a fan, and very sweet, just great guy. And then I met Mark, not as a fan through Gary Gianni. And I had known Mark for a couple years. And one day he asked me, "So what are you working on next?" This was in 2004. And I said, "Well, I'm hoping that the next book I work on is with you."
Right.
And that started the whole thing. So in 2005, Various Drawings Volume 1 came out. And this book that you're holding there, the portfolio
This
book,
one here.
that's a
Yeah.
collection of Various Drawings Volumes 1 through 5. And so that started in 2005 with Mark. And about every year and a half, 2 years, we put out a new volume between which is his latest commissions, his latest professional work, some of his sketches, and also some of the step by step that you see and you were talking about there. And there are those step by steps for every piece that's in the book. But Mark, he's pretty particular about which ones he wants to show and which ones he doesn't.
Yeah.
And despite everything that's in this book, there's a lot of stuff he doesn't want to see published or he doesn't feel is worthwhile. And but I do manage to twist his arm a bit and share, hey, this is good and this is why. And so he starts off, he's a bit of a nut when it comes to doing his artwork because he does a very rough, thumbnail in a sketchbook.
Hmm.
And then he'll do a pencil preliminary
This one
or
here.
two, yeah, or three.
Yeah.
And then once he's satisfied, then he transfers it. And this is all done by hand. And then he transfers it to a larger board.
How does
And
he
then,
transfer it? Does he use like a artograph projector,
yeah,
light table, something like
yeah,
that?
both. Hmm. And he does it and so what a lot of artists do these days is they take their prelims and they scan them
Hmm.
and they print them out in light blue line onto board
Yeah.
and do that. But he doesn't do that. It's all traditional. So, um, and then he'll go in, he'll do the finished ink. Um, And when he does the large version, so you see those pencils that you were seeing there,
Yeah.
he'll draw a finished pencil again on the big board, and then he'll go in there and ink it and cover it up. And so it's a really long process.
It's
So
amazing he gets so much done. Like I feel like just if I try to draw something to this level, it would take me a week. He's I mean, he's true, a true master of his craft, obviously.
Mark is someone who, uh, what I really like about him is I consider him that, we're all equally nutty because we
Hmm.
take what we do very seriously. And he's one of those guys that I've been working with him longer than anybody else in terms of the amount of books that I've done, but him and
Hmm.
Gianni are the two guys that I've known the longest out of the group of artists that I work with, and then Steve Rude. But he is such a great guy, and he's very humble. He's very he's mellow. We talk. It's not uncommon for us to talk for an hour, weekly,
Hmm.
and or every other week, depending on how busy we get. But consistently since 2004, I mean, we chat on the phone a lot, and it's not about artwork, it's just stuff. Sometimes I'm working on a book, he's inking something. We just keep each other company, share some gossip that we heard, in the industry or whatever. But he has a reputation for being really slow. And I think that's because he's just so meticulous in the stages,
Yeah,
because
you
each
can
thing.
see here, right? This is a rough and then a preliminary. Like
Mhm.
this looks, this is as finished as I might take my pencils, you know? And then he takes
Mhm.
it just further and further. And I don't know, there's other ones maybe that aren't in here for that particular page. Like you say, meticulous is a good word.
The inked piece that's at that top, yeah, I have the original to that, and that's one of the originals that nobody buys it at a show because there's no sexy woman or
Hmm.
any barbarian or something like that. And we'll get to the end of a show, and I'll see it and go, "Boy, this is amazing! I'll take that."
Yeah.
And so I have a bunch of originals like that, the stuff that nobody else wants.
So I was looking, you know, when I got these books and probably the carbon books, I got the carbon books first, and then this one came out, and I like just immediately got it. But I noticed he used this kind of certain kind of a line, and I tried and tried to figure out how he did it. And then I saw I read, I don't know if it was Carbon 4 or Carbon 5, in one of these introductions, he talks about the stylistic development that began almost by accident. Was he had a sable brush that gave him a split hair, and he was trying to fight it. And then he realized that it's actually the result of that brush like leveled him up a little bit in his work. It kind of gave him a new tool in his toolbox, and you see it in. I guess this is representing kind of the evolution of his work because that's what he's talking about a little bit in the introduction, and you can
Mhm.
see how it kind of came into his work here. And so this is why I think like you're making this for yourself, but like these books are made for creators. Like these little bits of information to me, this is so useful and so helpful. Everything in these, you know, seeing his preliminaries and then his just a brief, you know, 3 paragraph, 4 paragraph introduction. He could write anything he wants, and he goes in and writes about that. And
Mm.
another example of it that has been hugely beneficial for me is in this one here, the introduction, and I have these bookmarked because there's can't show some of this on Twitch, and forgive the tape, the 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 modestly placed tape there, but in this one, this is the William Stout Inspirations. His forward is, you know, maybe 2 paragraphs of what you would expect in a forward, and then the rest of it is the Rackham Dulac technique for
Mm.
painting in watercolor and ink, and he just goes through step by step. And I've like been in my practice, like every night I do an hour or two of just practice to try to get better at drawing, and I'm doing this technique. Like I've made paintings with this technique. You know, I had this book, you know, folded over. I hope it doesn't offend you. I use these
I
books
love
like
it.
these
I
books
love
to
it.
me are like I show love to a book by folding it over like this, putting it here, and having my artboard next to it, you
Good.
know, or
Yeah,
drawing
I
pictures
love
from
that.
it. And to me, this has been just such a revelation trying to get this kind of feel. Like it's just have another one I need to get. This is like the texture, the mood, and you can look at it all day long and try to reverse engineer it. But having the artist utilize that 1 page forward that he's got to describe exactly how he makes these, like what a it's just things like that that makes me love so many of these books. But was that his idea? Was that your idea? Was it how do you do that? Nobody else. that I'm aware of. I mean, you're probably going to say, the 20th century, all the art books had that kind of thing. But to my
Oh
knowledge,
no.
like in my
Yeah.
collection, there's not a lot of books that include that sort of thing.
Bill Stout is probably one of the most knowledgeable illustration historians in the country.
Hmm.
In his writing ability. He's also one of the best writers. So outside of his artwork and his knowledge base in pretty much any subject related to the sciences, related to dinosaur history, related to the arts, and all like fine arts, illustration art, comic artwork, there's maybe no one that knows more than Bill. And he can recite it. I do feel he has a photographic memory. He's one of the most knowledgeable people I've ever met. And so for him to put an introduction like that together, that's all straight from his head.
Hmm.
There's no research involved for Bill. And I'm sure he did that in just, an hour or something like that. And I've watched him draw, we've watched him paint, we've watched him color, and boy, is he fast. And that
Hmm.
stuff. So, unlike Mark, who has these various stages like this, Bill's pieces are just, it's a rough pencil straight to inks.
Hmm.
And then when he does the coloring, we have a lot of footage of him filming him when he both draws and colors, which I've never posted before.
Oh, you got to
And
post some of that.
I will at some point. I'm just so busy making books. Like I go, oh, should I take the time to post this video or should I work on a book? And I'd rather work on a book. So
Hmm.
I have footage going back 20 years of tons of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but Bill is an incredibly confident artist. And I think that Bill and Frank Cho are the two artists who I work with that just do loose pencils and then just go straight in with inks. And it's pretty incredible to watch them both work.
Hmm.
Frank needs just hardly any pencil lines before he goes to ink.
Well, I'll say anybody watching. I know that a lot of people who watch are creators. If you do like watercolor stuff, get this book. Get it for the art, but get it for the forward as well. Cause and I mean this is it's $20.
Mm.
This is extremely valuable for what you'll learn. I don't know. I'm so happy that I got this one. I think you were having a sale, and I was not familiar with William Stout's work, and
Oh.
um, and I give myself a budget for art books,
Mhm.
and I had a little bit of my budget left, and so I just added this one on a whim because I just kind of the art looked cool, and when it
Cool.
arrived, like of the whole stack of them, this is the one I've spent the longest with. So it was really kind of serendipitous that way.
That's cool.
I guess it well to get to it in the back of this Franklin Booth book. Talk a little bit
Hmm.
about artistic lineage with the time we got left in this conversation.
Hmm.
Um, you have this incredible 2-page spread here.
Isn't that cool?
I
By Dennis. Yeah.
This
I
is
didn't do that, but the
astonishing.
gentleman, yeah, the guy who did that, he specialized in that.
Hmm.
And he put a tremendous amount of time into that. And then um, we actually got the book and sent him an advance copy for him to see. And then he passed away because we knew it was coming.
Hmm.
Uh, I think within just a couple weeks after he got his copy, but he did get to see it and see the work that he put together and how it went into this book. And
So
just
this is
great.
so for the viewers, this is Franklin Booth's art lineage from student to teacher through 6 centuries, starting with Giotto in the late 1200s to early 1300s, and we have like this family tree of teacher to student to teacher to student to teacher to student to Franklin Booth. We go through Botticelli is in here, Da Vinci. It's incredible. Henri, more recently, who did he wrote the Art Spirit, I believe, which is a great
Mhm.
art book. There's Jerome. Like it's a who's who of the greatest artists of the past 6 centuries, and seeing who taught who all the way through Booth. And
Yeah.
and I love thinking about this kind of thing, and just having this as a reference, just to think about where this starts and where this ends,
Mhm.
and then going forward. and it may not be the student teacher necessarily, but it's the sort of influencer influencee. Frank Cho very clearly was influenced by Franklin Booth,
Hmm.
and I think in the book he mentions some of his
He
influences, but you
does.
can see for sure like some of this ink work here. This is very Booth. I also should mention like I love the stages, like you say. He just does his quick pencils and then
Hmm.
starts inking them straight away. And I can't show too much from this book either, unfortunately, because of the Twitch rules. But like
Hmm.
this is very much Franklin Booth, and so we have now these drawings from. I'm guessing this is from the past few years, and
It
so.
is. It's more recent, and he does call it the Booth method.
Mhm,
Anytime he posts something like that online or he's talking to somebody about it, he always says it's the Booth method. And the Art of Frank Cho, which was a large book that covered a lot of his Marvel, DC, and comics work, I wrote an introduction there, and
mhm.
I did the same thing, which I went from Frank and went all the way back, to a number of artists showing his influences. And I
Yeah,
do think there's a lot of, just like I discovered Franklin Booth through Bernie Wrightson, I think there's a lot of people that discover him through Frank's work.
I was going to ask you if you wouldn't, if you could, maybe fill in some of the gaps from Franklin Booth to Frank Cho. I know that like a lot of the sort of second half of the 20th century comic artists were all inspired by Kniff, Foster, and
Yeah.
Alex Raymond.
Raymond.
That's the ones, yeah.
Mm.
Kniff,
Yeah,
Foster, and Raymond.
those
Like,
are the three big shots. Yeah.
yeah, they influenced a lot of the EC guys, and Jack Kirby,
Mhm.
I think, was influenced by them. But if you could, like, with the time we got left, I'd like to talk about the sort of artistic lineage. How do we get from Franklin Booth to Frank Cho?
Well, I think that there's two. While their styles are not as precise or as
Hmm.
clean as Booth, Gary Gianni is a huge, admirer of Booth as well, and Roy Krenkel was as well. And I think those are two obvious choices. And even people who maybe you wouldn't expect would be. Let's see, there's a lot of 70s magazines and comics that came out that had that sort of booth attempt where people would do the lines like that. And the names are escaping me right now. I'm hoping somebody in the comments might be able to remind us. Um, they're right on the tip of my tongue, as they probably are with you
It's
as
going
well.
around then.
But I
Alfredo
think
Alcala, says Scott Connor.
yeah, Alcala's a good one. Yeah, definitely. Really good one. And Alcala, he's a Filipino artist and
Yeah, I
he
just I just met his son. I was tabling at a Comic Con in Manila a couple
oh
months
yeah.
ago, and
Oh
his son
cool.
just comes around. I guess they're putting out an art book of Alcala's work,
Oh
and
really?
yeah, it was
Oh
a
cool.
unexpected kind of mind blowing thing to talk to
Yeah.
him a little bit.
That's really cool. That whole Filipino artist group is
Hmm.
incredible. If you ever want to do an interview with my friend Manuel Awad, Awad Publishing,
Hmm.
he was friends with all those guys back in the Philippines.
Oh
He grew up
yeah,
in the Philippines with that whole crew. And the stories he has to tell, Nestor Redondo and Alcala and Ernie Chan and all of them, Tony DeZuniga, they were all friends. And Manuel's 90 now.
oh
And
yeah,
he's Alex Nino. He knew
yeah.
all
Alex Neal,
those
yeah, yeah,
guys.
that's right.
Knew them all when he was a teenager on up. So that's a whole different subject, of course.
Sure.
But that's a really neat story. No one's ever documented it, and there's just a lot of guys, but I think Booth was really instrumental. JC, as was JC Call and others. And
Hmm.
um, getting back to Mark Schultz, just quickly here,
Sure.
his one of his big influences in terms of the dry brush, because you mentioned the split brushes, is an artist named Dan Smith. And I don't know if too many people know who he is, but Mark has a couple Dan Smith originals hanging up at his house. And he's somebody who did a lot of work in the 20s and 30s, who's pretty spectacular. There's
Ah,
also
not
Lee.
familiar. I need to
Uh,
make a note of that. You said Dan
yeah, so
Smith.
he's, anyone like Al Williamson or Mark Schultz, and you mentioned Dan Smith, and they'll just be like, oh yeah, Dan Smith, or
Hmm.
even William Stout. So that's a big name. Also Lee Con. I don't know if it's Lee Conray or Conray, but it's Lee Leeco and then Conrey. His dry brush stuff is incredible. and he's another guy that did a lot of that kind of work. But it's
And
awesome.
I'll mention for the people watching, I've got some notes of different artists here and books, so I will post these. I'll post these in the Discord for those of you who are in the Discord, and I'll also
Mhm.
post them later on when I put this on YouTube. I'll put it in the description, some of the artists and the books that were mentioned during this conversation.
Cool. I'm trying to think. I know that I had, oh, here. I know we're jumping around a bit, but if anyone hasn't seen Monster Man, I didn't publish this, but this is by Gary Gianni, and beautiful, beautiful work. This is stuff that he did in the 90s. Some of it appeared in the back of Hellboy. And Gianni and Jeff Darrow both went to college together.
Oh,
And
really?
so, Gianni, Mignola. Actually, I'll tell if it's okay. I know we're jumping around a bit,
Oh,
but I can tell
go
a
for it.
story about how I met all these guys. And Gianni was the first, and through Gianni, I made everybody else. So back when I was doing the first book, the Franklin Booth book that I published, Painter with the Pen, that came out in 2002, I had um, emailed Gary Gianni out of the blue, and I said, I'm doing this Franklin Booth book. Would you be willing to write a little something or maybe share a little piece of artwork to include in there? And I did that with Frank Cho as well. And it was a way to sort of show that contemporary artists are influenced by him, and to show
Hmm.
maybe people who weren't familiar with Franklin Booth could have a little bit of a connection in that way.
Yeah.
And so Gary wrote right back to me. So he was the first professional that I had sort of a back and forth with. And he sent me an original, and he wrote up a little bit something, and that went in the book. And then I published the book in April of 2002 and sent a copy to Gary. And he said, "Hey, you should come and sit up with us at San Diego. Mark Schultz is going to be with me, and Mike Mignola will be next to me. And we have a wandering star booth, but we got a little space in our table. You should just come sit with us for the show." So within months after I published my first book, I'm sitting at San Diego Comic-Con with Gary Gianni, Mark Schultz, Mike Mignola, his wife Christine, and Jim and Ruth Keegan, who were there running the Wandering Star booth. And how amazing is that? Well, just have a stepping stone
Yes.
into the industry. And so everybody that was coming to the booth, they would
Hmm.
see the booth book, and I got to meet people, and you know, s- hanging out with all these people. And they were, Guillermo del Toro walks up to say hi to Mike, and so you see a lot of other people because they want to come by and see those people as well. So that was really my step into the industry, and it was
Hmm.
all through relationships. And that's something that's always been really important to me.
Yeah,
It's all relationship driven. So
I agree.
so
I think about that a
thanks to
lot.
Gary.
One of the regrets of living so far from the U.S. is not being able to go to all the different cons and meet. Like I see, in different online groups of comic artists and stuff, you see a lot of them. They know each other in person, and it's because they meet each other at the cons, and then they come back a couple months later to a different one. They see them there, and they just kind of have that face to face interaction.
Mm,
It's I mean, I get to meet Alfredo Alcala's son, I guess, but
mhm.
you know, that kind of experience is amazing. I'm super jealous.
Yeah, it was really lucky. I mean, I was really lucky the way it all worked out. But then, um, and I'm mentioning Jim Vadeboncoeur here a lot, but also when I was working with him, I used to help him at his booth at Comic-Con as well, at the San Diego Comic-Con. And I'm hanging out at the booth one time, and Frank Frazetta walks in the booth, and we get to meet Frank Frazetta. So we met a lot of people as dealers as well,
Yeah,
which was really neat.
amazing. So Scott Connor said, I think most of us were introduced to Dan Smith's work via Mark, and
Uh,
I get the feeling that most of us who appreciate like modern day comic art are all familiar with Franklin Booth's work, just filtered through everybody who came since. So I guess this would be a good place to end with his book on the screen. But
mhm.
if there's anything else you wanna talk about, you want to add, um, you know,
Yeah, could I add you know, in case some people haven't seen it yet, this is the new uh, Hellboy book.
Right. And that's up
It's
right now
into
on your website, I believe.
yeah, Into the Silent Sea,
Mm-hmm.
and this is the making of the comic. Sorry, I cannot get this camera to line up with
It's
the book.
impossible to do. There's no
Yeah,
way. It's impossible to do that well. It says
but it
this is
really,
ships October 7th, so it's available to pre-order right now. And that's
yeah,
fleskpublications.com. The link is there in the chat.
yeah. And it was fun because it's really going over all the details, and it's a very much something that either fans or artists are going to like because
Hmm.
it covers a lot. And we were, Vicky and I were down in Southern California a few weeks ago, and we stopped at Mike's house just before he moved to New York. And he signed some book plates that we're going to tip in as well. So that's really
Great.
fun.
Yeah, I love that you
So,
include a lot of that stuff with these. There's I got at least one Mark Schultz signed book plate, and
mhm,
the Franklin Booth book. I have taken them out. They're in my pile of things to frame, but this came with a couple of prints
mhm.
of his work as well. I think one of them was in color.
Yeah,
I have a stack of things every time I go to the framer. I'll bring for my own work. I'll bring one or two things of my collection of stuff to add to it. But the pile is
yeah,
huge. But that's why it's
yeah.
not in the book right here. But this did come with a couple of beautiful prints of Booth's work.
Cool. We don't advertise it, but oftentimes when we get new orders, we'll grab stuff and throw it in.
Yeah, that's how I
And
got this one.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
we do that a lot. We just throw stuff in and we don't advertise it. We don't say anything.
Hmm.
And we like to surprise people. And it's fun for me.
I should say that this one here. So this came with a nice little note saying thanks for your order. We please enjoy this book as well.
Mhm.
And I lent this. I have a few of my friends are English teachers, and so one of my friends he does private lessons, and so I lent him this book to use for his private lessons. He says the kid loved it. He's a elementary
Cool.
school kid going through, and so those of you out there who are educators,
Yeah,
especially if
yeah.
you're teaching English as a second language or English as a foreign language,
Are you
this one
familiar
here.
with the artist Mark
I know
Chiarello?
Mark Chiarello because I know that he's responsible for a lot of the best comics from I think DC
Yeah.
from maybe
Oh
the '90s
yeah.
and the 2000s.
Uh-huh.
I think he was behind a lot of the like when you look at DC and you think I can't believe DC decided to publish that. It's probably because Mark Chiarello did. Is that correct?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Darwin Cook, New Frontier.
Yeah, and the solo
Yeah.
series I think.
Yeah. The solo
Um,
series.
and I know
Yeah.
he has how to color comics the DC way or
That's
something
right.
like that. I have that book on my
Mhm.
shelf as well.
Yeah. Darwin Cook, he had sent a submission to DC. This is back when they actually still accepted submissions, and
Mhm.
Chiarello at times would go through it, and he said that all of the envelopes were all the same color. And he was looking at the stack, and there was one that was a different color than the standard manila envelope,
Mhm.
and he pulled it, and it was a submission by this guy named Darwin Cook. And he looked through the submission and he hired him based on the stuff that he saw. And of course, you got the great Catwoman and
Yeah,
New Frontier, which is one of my absolute favorite
so much
comic
good stuff.
series ever.
Yeah, Scott Connor says
Yeah,
Darwin is sorely missed, and he really is.
he's so good, so good. And I have some originals by him, and I cherish those things. Those things will never leave the house.
He captured sort of the essence of I don't know all the best parts about Silver Age DC with
Hmm.
a more of a modern kind of sensibility. I think maybe the best of Silver Age, the best of Bruce Timm, and then
Hmm.
his own
Yeah,
kind of distinct vision on top of it.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I never got to meet him in person, but I wish I could. There's a couple more. There's Shane Glines and there's Glenn Murakami, who are both pretty amazing too, who work in that animation style. And um, actually, I was just looking at my desk here, and here's a good example of what um, what Bruce and I do. So, like for instance, you can see that's Bruce's note to me. So I
Hmm.
will actually print stuff out to him and put it together with a little binder
Yeah.
clip, and I'll mail it to him, and I'll write my notes down by hand, and then he'll write all his notes down by hand as well. And we go back and forth this way. And actually, this one's pretty funny because he actually does a little drawing. And so I sort of put a page together, and then he'll write this back to me and do a little drawing. Oh, try it like this.
Yeah.
Or and he'll write some instructions to me or something like that. And here's another one. So I have these for all the books that we do, I have all of these handwritten notes from Bruce when we work together because he likes to do everything by hand like this.
Yeah.
And I save all these things and I put them in a box. They're just so cool to be able to look at
Yeah,
how
I
he
gotta
thinks.
archive that stuff. That's that's Billy Ireland Comic Museum kind of
Uh-huh.
material.
Yeah.
You ever thought about publishing a book of that kind of a thing? The
No, I never thought about it.
Mhm.
But
Like it'd be
one
like a meta art book.
yeah, one thing that I did think about is in a couple of years, it'll be the 25th anniversary. And I was thinking of, I mentioned I'm really into photography and I have been since I was a kid. And I have taken a ridiculous amount of photographs of whenever we're together as
Hmm.
groups. And so I have studio pictures and just us goofing around with everybody. And beyond that, I was thinking about putting a gallery book together, which shows a little section on every artist that I've published.
Oh yeah, that's a great
And
idea.
then a bunch of the pictures, maybe some stories in the back,
Hmm.
and then also, trying to get everybody to sign it. So I think it'd be pretty cool. It'd be fun for me. It's a way to look back on 25 years
Yeah.
and share a lot of stuff that I've just never shown people before. But we've done a lot. We've had a lot of trips together as a group. You know the if you've ever heard of this Mad Magazine back in the
Yeah,
50s and
sure.
the 60s, there's these famous Mad trips that they took. And where all the artists and Bill Gaines would take everybody out. And we've done a number of those things, and they're really fun. It could be, the Dotsons and Schultz or Gianni, or sometimes five of us, and we all get together and go do something. And
Hmm.
it's really fun. So we've got a lot of pictures from things like that. So I thought that would be fun to write about.
Yeah, it's like a good time. Well, chat agrees that that would be fascinating. So
Oh,
you
cool.
have at least a few of us here who hope that you'll put something like that together.
Good,
Yeah,
good.
I encourage you strongly to do so. I would love to see that.
It's really just time because
Yeah.
um, there's no way I will ever accomplish everything that I want to in my life. It's just not physically possible. There's not enough years. I just don't have enough time. All the artists who I want to work with, all the books I want to do with each artist. So you just pick them one by one and just kind of do what you can.
Can you tell us
Um,
what three you're working on right now?
ah, the big one, which is William Stout Comics. It's a 3 volume set. And it's it's turned into far more than just Bill Stout comics, like the comic work that he did, because he's worked with so many people like Harvey Kurtzman, Bill Elder, Russ Manning, and he's written chapters on all of them in terms of what it was like to work with them, um, core memories,
Hmm.
stories of things they did together, he learned from them. So it's going to be a bit, it's turned into something else. So each volume has about 50,000 plus words in it of Bill telling stories about things that he's done. And he started young in the late 60s. And he's one of think only a handful of people that had been to every single San Diego Comic Con.
Wow.
And again, his encyclopedic knowledge of memories in his head and his storytelling. It's a really neat book. So all 3 volumes, the rough draft is done. The only thing I need to do is go in and just touch them up. So the first volume of that's the book. The second book is, let me see which one we're going to do next. It's another one with Bruce. We finished the horror book. So this is our mock-up here,
You make that bigger.
which is, you know,
Wow.
you can see the title hasn't been picked yet, but this is what we're working on right
Hmm.
now. And So it's just a whole, again, this is, Bruce sent this back to me. It's got all his notes all throughout it. And so I will send him like a little thumbnail. I'll type out some notes and he'll answer the questions. And so we're working on this one now. That's just all his crime stuff. And there's even there's even another one. This one. And this is like a fantasy collection. So it's, this is just a placeholder, Sounding Worlds of Bruce Timm. That's not the actual
Yeah.
title, but um, so I call these book proposals. So what I do is I mock them all up with all the images inside. And then this is the beginning stage. And this is where Bruce will put an X through stuff or say, nah, I don't like it. Or yeah, that's a good one. Or I'm not sure. And here he'll X out certain things that he doesn't want. He'll circle the ones that he likes. And then from there, we know which pieces we're going to actually include in the book. And then I'll start tightening it up and then send him another version. And then we'll tighten it up some more and go back and forth. So, yeah, so there's a crime book, there's a fantasy book with Bruce, and those are pretty well underway. Um, and then the Stout book, there's a Stephanie Law book. She's a fantasy artist, and that book is uh, it's pretty close to being done, about 80% or so. And then there's an Arthur Adams Monkey Man and
Oh
O'Brien
man.
collection,
That
and that's about it's close to 500 pages of material because Arthur he doesn't live too far away from me, and yeah, that was so much fun to put together.
this is why I think you make these for artists.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
this is just his roughs. And
yeah,
as far as deconstructing goes, I've drawn so many pictures out of this just to try to get in his head and figure out what he's thinking about when he's planning his pages out.
yeah. When Arthur does a cover, he typically does 3 to 6 versions of it like this, and then he'll pick one, and then
Hmm.
he'll go from there. So, over the years, scanning his artwork, he just gives me piles of these things, and then I was like, Arthur, we should just make a little book out of this. This is really cool, and I hope that people cut those pages out and ink them and have fun with it
Yeah,
because you really,
I've scanned them and inked them. I haven't thought about
Mhm.
cutting them out and doing that. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Just ink right on there. I usually just flop it open like this, crack the spine, put my sketchbook down,
Mhm.
and do a 1-to-1. Try to like
Oh yeah.
for me, like there's parts of how the jawline, right? I
Mhm.
really want to improve my jaw lines, especially on female figures. And there's just an elegant kind of mark that he makes to get these jaw lines. So I've drawn a lot of his jaws.
Yeah.
Just this line here. And this book has been really helpful. You can see how he kind of starts his heads. A lot of these you can see his
Mhm.
construction lines and stuff. So
The the preliminaries that you're seeing there, they were done much lighter than what you see. So we intentionally darkened them
mhm.
because if we had reproduced them at the original brightness level, they're really faint. It's just a
Mhm.
really light blue pencil.
Well, that's
So
really good to know too.
um, that's an example of where we altered the artwork intentionally with Arthur's approval to make sure that it read really well as a book for people to enjoy. Because again, it would have been too faint if we
Yeah.
didn't do.
And you have another Arthur Adams book that I every time I see the cover, I think it must be mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't gotten it yet, but it's probably next on my list when my art book budget
Mm-hmm.
recoups one here.
Yeah. Well, we all understand budgets, so and
But
then
yeah, so I love that you have a range of his work from this stuff, and then I assume the interior of this is more finished stuff.
it is. Yeah. With that book there, and this was intentional, we did I made sure that we showed at least 1 to 3 pieces of artwork from every year he was working. So it starts off from 82, I think, and then shows a few examples, and we go all the way up until when the book was released. So you'll see 40 years of examples, so you can see how he grew. And
I just
Arthur's
noticed
really
that
fun.
this is contiguous, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And we have a gatefold in the back, so you can
Hmm.
see the whole thing. You can pull out the whole piece and see it really well. And there could
And
be, Mhm.
I'm sorry, please.
Oh, in the pictures, if you click on one of those, you might see the gatefold. So you can see, because we have examples of the books, and click on those arrows, and there should be one with the gatefold. Let's see, not that one, but um, this book I designed. Oh, there it is. Yeah, so we do have a gatefold. And on the reverse side, you'll see the black and white version. But um, Arthur's one of those guys where I'll send a PDF of the book to and I go, "What do you think?" And he'll reply back and go, "Looks good." And I'll say, "Did you look at it?" And he'll be like, yeah." And so I don't even know if he's ever even looked at this book. And that's kind of a joke, but kind of not. But Arthur is just one of those guys who I do the book and he looks at it and he really doesn't have much feedback, whereas other people like to get much more involved. But I like to think it's because he trusts me. Um, but this was, I'm
Well,
a
you
huge,
got a good track record, so I can see why he would.
but Arthur and Mike Mignola, those two guys, I've been buying their stuff ever since I was a kid and never stopped. So Rocket Raccoon, I bought that when I was a kid. Long Shot, bought it when I was a
Hmm.
kid. And so I've been fans of these guys for a long time. And, I saw them around when I was younger working at comic shops. And so those are the two big guys to me.
When you talk about artistic lineage, I think Arthur Adams was hugely influential on the artists of the 90s, right?
He was, yeah, Humberto Ramos
Hmm.
and a lot of other people, yeah.
All right.
And also, Mike wasn't popular like Arthur in the beginning.
Yeah.
It took him a little longer to turn into Mike Mignola, and whereas Arthur was just straight out of the guns with the X-Men annuals and long shot, and he was a huge superstar, but Mike was more of a slow burn for
Well,
people,
in
and then
he's one of those examples of the artists you can see their evolution. Like his early
yeah,
work is really cool, but you can see how it kind of it goes from project to project, and it becomes what we now associate with Mignola, like
yeah,
the beautiful compositions, the stark black and white, that kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, yeah, and it just I don't know. I feel like he brings a level of sophistication to comics that they
Mhm.
deserve.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when I started publishing and I was really into illustration books, my first thought was, well, why can't we make a book on a comic artist that's like it would be done on a fine artist?
Hmm.
And the Steve Rude book, which is the first big color book that I published, that's exactly what it was. It's like, let's treat this the same way as people treat fine art books, because I really felt that a lot of books that were done on comic artists were more like fanzines,
Hmm.
but they weren't really treated in a way that I wished that I saw. Um,
I've
and
long held that comic art is fine art, and in
mm,
addition, I think it's maybe one of the most difficult and most sophisticated art forms because you're juggling so many things. You have to do everything an illustrator does, but then you also
mhm,
have to have clear storytelling. You have to have stuff happening over time. You have to
yeah.
be able to draw anything out of your imagination, more or less. I mean, you can use a little bit of reference, but if you're finding reference for every single thing, you're never going to make a comic. So, for the sake of
Mm,
expediency, you have to be able to just think about how a thing works, construct it quickly. Eh, There's just so much that goes into making comics that I think
mhm.
it belongs in the sort of pantheon of fine arts.
Yeah,
That's how I feel, but
absolutely.
I guess I might be biased because that's how I come to art in the first place.
I like storytelling. I like stuff that, shows, well, just basic storytelling. And,
Hmm.
um, I think that anything done for illustration or comic art is just as worthy as being in a museum as anything else, and I've never seen the difference.
Yeah, same here.
And even the fine art that I'm attracted to, it's good storytelling.
Yeah, for sure.
It needs to speak to me, but I really don't see a difference. Um, Now the fine art stuff, that's kind of, put together by billionaires for billionaires, it doesn't really, I don't get it.
Yeah,
It's not my thing. But I like just the working artist that really knows how to tell a good story.
yeah, that's maybe a different genre of art.
Yeah, I don't get it. So, yeah. But it's cool. But Booth is, boy, he's so good. And he's the, I mean, just looking at these pages as you're flipping through, it was my love for this artist's work that got me publishing.
Hmm.
And so thanks to Booth. And again, I hope that his spirit is happy with what I did, and because it's my goal to make him look good.
Well, this
And
this book has been hugely important for me. So um, it's I like I knew of Booth. I had seen some of his works, but having this where you can really dig in and see it all in
mm,
context, and then having the the essay you have it
yeah,
by Alice A. Carter,
yeah,
and
yeah.
the Ebenos Nabby book as well has a really wonderful
Mhm.
essay, and just being able to expand my artistic horizons in this way has been really important for me. So I'm
Yeah.
I think you did good by him.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So Alice, who goes by Bunny, we all call her Bunny. She was
Hmm.
born on Easter,
Hmm.
and Bunny is also one of my big mentors. I met Bunny through Jim. Bunny was also living in Palo Alto, California, and her dad and Walt Reed used to hang out together and collect artwork. And Walt Reed was Illustration House, and he worked for the famous artist schools,
Hmm.
and he not only did his last book when he was in his 90s that I published, and I got to spend time with him, which was amazing. But did a book on Harold von Schmidt, among other people, John Clymer book, and his books and his design sense and the way he approaches things, I just really resonated with stuff. And to be able to meet him and then work with him to publish his last book was pretty spectacular. And we met up one time, and then there was a snowstorm, so I was stuck with him for an extra day, which was incredible.
How unfortunate.
I know. And so Bunny, Jim, and Walt Reed, I'd say those are three huge influences in my life and mentors, because they were
Hmm.
very, here's a guy who was in his, I was 29 when I started publishing, and they just welcomed me in and helped me out. So nothing happens without other people helping you. So this
Yeah.
isn't everything that I've done, none of it has been alone. There's always been people there for me, just like Vicky is with me, and she helps me daily. And she's an incredible designer too. And being able to work with Bunny and Bunny for the Franklin Booth book and the Abbey book, I asked her if she'd write an introduction,
Hmm.
and this is what she did.
Yeah, that's
It's
quite an
much more than
introduction.
an introduction. I mean, she
Yeah.
poured her life into it, and they're so good. It really humanizes the person. It makes
Yeah.
them real beyond just the artwork. You're like, wow, this was a living person, and look at all these things. And not only that, but when you read these two, you can tell they were really kind people.
Yeah, I got that
And
that feeling about Abby. I recently read this one, and I
mhm,
got the feeling that he's the kind of person you'd like to hang out with.
yeah, yeah. And that goes a long way with me because there's no way I'm working with somebody that mistreats people.
Yeah. I think maybe going back to the very first question, asking how would you go about approaching
Oh
such a
yeah.
large kind of project that you've never done before. I guess
Hmm.
surrounding yourself with the right people, the right support, and the right
Yeah,
knowledge is probably
yeah,
a really good step in the direction of taking on such a project, right?
absolutely. And
There it is.
it gives you a lot of confidence because I grew up with no confidence, not having parents, not having people to support me, not having anyone to guide me, having no real adults really helping me in any
Hmm.
way. And if anything, they were horrible to have in my life. So adults were really not the best thing to me when I was a kid. And then I get older and I find these people who kind of take me under their wing. And, here I am, walking wounded to somebody who has all this confidence because they see something in me. And it's incredible feeling the first time somebody says, Yeah, I believe in you. I see you. Like I know, you got it. Like, and if you need me for anything, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
And to get all those things in my 20s and never have that as a kid or in my teens, it was just amazing. So, in a lot of ways, artwork, being a publisher, it allowed me to create a family.
Hmm.
I've got this group of people who mean the world to me. It's completely relationship driven. Everything I do is because I enjoy the relationships. This is not a business to me. I really don't care about the money. I need the money to be able to publish. I need the money to be able to feed myself and house myself and things like that. But outside of that, I really don't care about money. I'm not driven by it. It doesn't do anything for me. It serves its purpose in, okay, cool, a book did really good. Oh, cool, now we can do another
Yeah,
book.
right.
We have the funds to be able to do more. And if I was a millionaire boy, would I make a lot of books,
Yeah, I
open
hear
a
you.
community center,
Yeah.
like have my 4-story community center and just welcome people in for free. So I can use other people's money to do a lot of things for the community. And that's where I get really excited about what you can do with money, but I
Yeah.
don't get excited about money in itself.
Yeah, I feel
And
that for sure.
yeah, yeah.
So
Mhm.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Um, to wrap up, uh, talked about you being like a sculptor, designer, and
Oh,
like a curator. I feel like you're also an archivist. You're an archivist of the artworks themselves. Maybe a lot of these would get lost to the ages in some of these books if you hadn't published them. But also the like the lineage, like we talked about, and also some of the techniques, like the Rackham Dulac or Mark
mm,
Schultz's split hair kind of thing. I feel like if that wasn't put in recorded for posterity, we might lose it. So I really appreciate that aspect of what you do as well. And thank you so much for talking to me.
yeah,
Pretty.
thank you for that. I've never heard anyone describe me as a sculptor before. But that's a nice thing to hear.
But
And
this
I'm
is
just
this is
happy.
a sculptural object, right? Like, yeah,
Yeah. I think it has a different meaning when you can hold it
hmm,
and you can feel it like that and you have the weight in your hands because I do look at a lot of artwork online. But man, when you look at it in a book, there's just something extra to it that I'm not really sure how to explain, but
yeah.
it just feels different. And so yeah, it's really fun for me, and I enjoy sharing. So I'm just sharing stuff that I like and sharing about people who I like. So yeah, it's kind of a win-win. And thank anyone who buys a book from us that lets us continue this. I am just eternally grateful.
Well,
And I do
thank you.
this little, I do this, I'm sorry, I'm rambling here, but there's one
Go
last
on.
thing I'll say. So when orders come in, because we fulfill our own orders off the website, Vicky and I do, and I
Hmm.
enjoy starting my day like that. I'll fulfill orders and then do a little office work and then work on books later in the day. And when the orders come in, I print them out and I look at the names and I'll do a thank you to each person. I'll be like, oh, thanks, Scott. Thanks, thanks this person. And I'll thank the names kind of, and because, they make this all work. So um, I'm constantly grateful for the position we're in. So
Well, I cannot recommend highly enough your books. The link is in chat, so please go check out the website and get get everything. There's so much good stuff here, and thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your time with us. Really appreciate it.
thanks, John. Appreciate you taking the time to do this. This was really fun. Thanks.